On today's episode of Homeworthy, we're bringing you to Connecticut for an inside look into interior decorator Libby Cameron's layered and colorful home. An avid animal lover, Libby has incorporated vibrant wildlife motifs around every corner, from printed fabrics and brass figurines to artwork and dogs, not to mention her litter of adorable Labrador puppies. Enjoy! You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story. Like and subscribe for more.
Hello, Homeworthy. I'm Libby. Welcome to my Connecticut house. Come on in and look around and I'll give you a tour. I'm Libby Cameron. I have been living in this house for about 6 years. Believe it or not, I've only really lived in 3 houses in my entire life, which is kind of a frightening thought. But at any rate, I have been in the design business since 1983, I believe, so 40 years. And I do mostly residential projects all over the country. Some in the Bahamas, some abroad. I think that this house is a reflection of me because I think I love color, I love whimsy, I love the unexpected and the sort of quirky things that happen in life. So you'll see that most of what's in this house has been collected or repurposed somehow, and most of the pieces have come from friends and people I used to work with. I've actually bought very little. It's all just sort of comes with me wherever I go. There are 13 dogs right here now in the house. 6 are permanent and there are 7 puppies. I may keep a little girl. But I had a dog, or got a dog about 20 years ago who I just adored. He was my best friend, and I don't know, just one animal that really stayed with me in life. And he was beautiful to boot, from a very good line of Labradors. His grandmother was the grand champion at Westminster in the Labrador division. But so his name was George, so I got George a wife named Fig, and have had litters. Now of the 6 dogs I have, they're all descendants. I have great-granny down to great-grandchildren. And I just love it. I love the experience of whelping a litter of puppies and you know, seeing how tiny they are and how she responds, whichever mother it is. And you know, in this world where everything is so crazy and there's so much negativity and so much sparring with politics, there's something so pure and wonderful about a litter of puppies and the mother's response and just life at its best, life at its simplest and purest. This is the foyer, which hasn't changed in shape, but when I first bought the house, this was a slatish stone kind of floor, and there was an Italianate sort of banister and railing, and it's a very difficult space to put a rug in because of the shape, and it's, you know, you don't want to put a rug this way. You can put one that way, but then that area has nothing to go on. So I put in a wood floor, and it was white for years, and then during COVID, my friend Matthew Terrell came over and painted it. Sort of a fantasy marble, whatever it is. But you know, all of the things that I have in this house have sentimental value to me. I mean, this cow was given to me by John Roselli. I just love him. I love his eyes and sort of the softness of his muzzle. I think he's so sweet. This piece Albert Hadley gave to me. I just remember working on it forever to get this tortoiseshell finish that he did, and you know, his discussion about sizing it so that it wasn't so big that it wasn't you know, it was realistically looking like a piece of tortoise shells because tortoise shells aren't that big. And this little hat umbrella stand was from John Roselli, and it has sort of my odd collection of walking sticks for the most part. I lose every umbrella I ever get. The wallpaper was one that I worked with Albert designing in the 80s for a client, and it's named after her, Sue Ellen, made by Xena Studios. And, you know, they're just little things I collect along the way. I think that little mirror Mrs. Parish gave me of this sunflower, which I've always loved. I don't know what it was originally. It was probably on the, I don't know, maybe it was on a carving of, in a wall carving or something in a church. I don't know where it came from. But, you know, when I see something, I go for it. So this is a hat rack I found in Maine at a funny little antique shop that doesn't exist anymore, sadly. But I love the wheel back shape of it, with all of its, you know, sort of, I mean, it's nothing special, but it just, again, I don't think things have to be priceless to have character. When I first moved into this house, there were a pair of doors. This hallway, or this foyer, had many, many doors. There was a pair of doors here, a pair of doors into the living room, and this was a pair of doors with absolutely no light. So I took out those doors and had a Dutch door made and put in the side lights just to get the light in the house. Oh, sorry, dogs. Part of the house. Well, I've always have been an animal lover, and I was convinced as a child that I would be a veterinarian. And I worked at veterinary hospitals in Washington, D.C., where I grew up. And then I worked as a zookeeper at the National Zoo in Washington. And then I actually got an internship for 6 months at Gerald Durrell's Zoo off the coast of France on the island of Jersey. And had a sort of pretty scary experience there where I got caught in a gorilla pen with baby gorillas and essentially lost my nerve to stay with animals. Also, being a zookeeper, I didn't think sort of hit all the bases for me. So I came back and I moved to New York, and I worked for a caterer for a little while, and then I worked for the Central Park Conservancy. And as a child, I couldn't even ask for my allowance. So trying to fundraise was not my strong point. So then I was sort of at a crossroads. I had just gotten married, and I was very close to an uncle, Rory Cameron, who lived for the most part in the south of France, and I was very, very close to. And he happened to be coming to New York, so I asked him sort of to help me figure out what I should do in life. And he immediately said, "Oh, you should get into interior design, you would love it." So he encouraged me to reach out to Sister Parish, who was someone whose name I knew as a child, and she had worked for my grandmother's sister as well as my grandparents. And so I invited myself for tea. And she very firmly said, "We never hire the children of clients." And Albert Hadley joined us and said, "Oh, go back to school, learn something about design," because all I really knew about is animals. And, you know, I had absolutely no experience with design. I didn't know what a braid versus a picture hook was. But I took his advice and I went to Parsons, and Rory said, keep calling, see if anything opens up. And luckily, I got a phone call one day that they needed some help for me to essentially be a gopher and sit in an apartment during an installation and, you know, accept deliveries and supervise, you know, people coming and going and make sure they showed up and that sort of thing. And it turned into a full-time job. So that was in early 1983. So this is the living room. And again, these are all things that have just sort of been a part of my life forever. With the, you know, I don't think there's anything that, I might have bought that coffee table, but I think everything else is either a family piece or a street find. So when I moved into this house, I did recover everything, and this was a fabric that I've always loved that has been discontinued. So it was sort of the starting point for the room. On top of this panel, which is actually a copy of the one of 3 that Mrs. Parish had in her dining room in her New York City apartment. I just loved it. It was John Roselli did it. I just love the colors. I love everything, the sort of the whimsy of it. These lamps from Christopher Spitzmiller came from a client. I've always loved these pillows made by Robin Goss because she makes things out of string and ribbons, and they just makes for such a nice texture. But all of the upholstery, none of it's new, it just gets repurposed. The chaise was from my ex-husband's family. It was in a bedroom upstairs. Nobody wanted it, but it's the best place to read. This funny little table was Hadley gave me, which I love. I'm not sure of the story of it, but I remember him saying something about it coming from the Duchess of Windsor had a similar table. If not, that was hers. I doubt it was hers, but at any rate. The man was from my ex-husband's family's place in Long Island. He was on the porch, and I think he's been repainted many times by different gardeners, but and he must have had something in his hand years ago, but he's just sort of a wonderful character. I don't know if he's a Swami, but he must have been one of the guards for an Indian palace. This funny little piece, it's not really an apothecary chest. I don't even think it's decoupage. Yeah, it is decoupage. But it's just a funny thing that I found antiquing one day with Hadley. The chairs he gave me. These dogs, my father gave these to me as a wedding present, and they're stirrup cups, a set of 6. I've always loved them. And they're, this one was for spices to put on top of the mulled wine or whatever you would drink at an English hunt. These paintings are by my stepmother's father, but his name was Eugene Leake. I love these Anthony Fry paintings. Albert gave me this little basket of strawberries, which I love. It's just sort of an odd mixture of things. This table belonged to my ex-husband's grandmother. I've had the leather restored a couple of times, but it gets bleached by the sun in this room, but it's just sort of this wonderful, strange mercury glass boot table. This screen was from my great aunt's house in Arizona. It was a wreck when I got it after she died, so I had it restored, but I love it. I love the birds and I love the colors in it. And this funny little chair Mrs. Parish gave to me years ago, I guess it was a sample originally, as was that one, for chair makers to have in their shops so that they didn't take up too much space. That bench was a Parish-Hadley design, as was this little table. And then these other things, I don't know where they came from. I mean, that I know I found with Albert shopping at one point. Mrs. Parish gave me that pillow. I think Albert gave me this pillow for my birthday one year with the cat, knowing that I loved animals. So the rug was from Corey Rugs, which doesn't exist anymore in New York City. They gave it to me as a thank you for another rug that I have found for somebody. My marriage ended in 1995, and I decided that I needed to change my life. So I have many, many dogs, too many dogs, and wanted more space. When we lived in Larchmont, we lived on 1/8 of an acre, and at that point I think we had 4 dogs. And I just wanted more space. I wanted lower taxes. So I started looking, and I looked at many, many houses. I probably looked at 35 houses, and this house was a dump. I mean, the pond was a swamp. The siding was coming off. The driveway was all crumbling, but I just thought there's something about having a pond that I thought was just wonderful. And I still feel that, even though the dogs come in covered in mud many days. But I don't know, I just really liked the piece of property. So slowly, over the past 6 years, I've been fixing it up and cutting down trees and, doing bits and pieces here and there. I mean, cosmetically, I redid the inside, but it's always, I don't think I'm ever satisfied with the way something looks. It's always an excuse to redo something. But it's been fun. It's a good project. Well, I think you sort of have to pay attention to the colors, but I don't think there's anything wrong with having a blue chair that has a, pattern on it with the yellow. I mean, the more the merrier, in my opinion, as long as they all sort of speak to each other. This is the only entrance to the back of the house, and there's a little terrace out there. And for a long time, I really struggled with this room about how to place the furniture. I thought about having a sofa there. At one point, I had a sofa here, but the room got cut in half. And I figured for the amount of times I would use that door, it doesn't make any sense to, not use this end of the room. So it made sense to put the sofa there and have another seating groups. I mean, that was one of the cardinal rules at Parish-Hadley, is always to get as many seating groups in a room as possible. These bookshelves, gosh, I actually painted and gilded these myself in 1983. They were much taller, and when I lived in a loft on Broome Street, there was a finial above them to give you an idea of how high the ceilings were. And sadly, when I moved into this house, I had to cut the base down 2 inches, but I love them. Rory Cameron had similar ones. They were more diminutive, but they were the same kind of pyramid bookcases, and I just love the shape of them. This sculpture is by Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney, and everyone sort of jokes that he's the texter because it looks like he's texting a phone, but my guess is that she made this in the 30s or 40s, but he's one of her many sculptures that were in my husband's family. I just love him. And this was a mirror from the Parish-Hadley collection. So you can see everything's just a big mix. I mean, this is a nothing table that came from my aunt. That table there with all the little boxes on it all those boxes were her. I loved her. So I kept some of the things that I think meant the most to her, especially she had racehorses, and I've always loved this little silver jockey's cap. Yeah, so these are for my grandson and granddaughter who's on her way. And I love this little lion basket with his mane, and I think he's very sweet. And I find this little voice in my head sometimes saying, oh, don't do that because it won't work because, but for the most part, it's just guttural. I mean, I think you either understand it or you don't.
What do you love the most about this house?
I love the amount of color in it, because color always makes me happy. I remember when I first moved to New York, walking by dry cleaners and seeing all of the spools of thread inside the windows of where the people were repairing clothing for people, and just always being mesmerized by all the different colors that were on the boards holding all the little spools of thread. So this is my dining room. It's a pretty bright color, but I love this color. I think it's warm and it's a happy color. And I guess that's always matters to me. These chairs I've had, Albert Hadley actually brought the original back from one of his many trips to Tennessee, and I had them copied. And they're mahogany, but I painted them white because I just thought they were too boring in a mahogany finish. And put the leather on. So this leather's got to be 35 years old, but it's held up. Not a classic dining room in that it's so filled with color. I fell in love with this rug at Elizabeth Eakins, and I was lucky enough to be at John Roselli's store in New York when it was on 73rd Street, where I found this elephant who I had to have. Luckily, I have always had a wall big enough to put it on. This bench was a street find. I was going to meet a client with Albert Hadley one morning, and we saw it on the side of the street, and luckily Parish-Hadley we had a car and driver, and it was a big station wagon. So Albert and I put it in the back of the station wagon, and it needs to be reupholstered, but it will someday. These are copies that John Roselli makes of sconces that Mrs. Parish had in her entrance hall in New York, and I love them. I just think they're such an unexpected shape for a wall sconce. This decoupage is by Apple Bartlett, who is Mrs. Parish's daughter, and she makes these incredible decoupage creations. I have quite a few of them around the house, but I love them. They're, you know, she usually finds pieces of wood that she puts together, and this is just a piece of plywood, but you know, she works them all in and adds all the different pieces. I happen to love this goat. I saw him at the gift show one year and just thought he was so sweet. These curtains, believe it or not, are from 1983 for a show house I worked on in Southampton with Albert. This was a wallpaper panel that was getting thrown away at Parish-Hadley, so I took it. All this blue and white Canton china was from my aunt when she died. She had a collection, so I've sort of placed it around, and I think it's so pretty with this blue mirror chest, which belonged to my ex-husband's family, along with the sconces my mother-in-law gave to me years ago, which I love. I just fell in love with him. I saw him on Instagram. He's from some place in Florida, in Palm Beach, West Palm Beach. I can't remember the name of the shop now. But I just thought he was so sweet. There was something about his feet that I loved. They're so sort of round and funny looking. So this ram, during COVID, Mario Buada's pieces were at auction, and I just loved this ram. I thought he was so sweet, and I thought I was being so smart and saving so much money by driving up to Hudson and putting him in my car, but he didn't fit. So I drove home with him on the top of my car, and I think I bent the frame a little bit, so he's sagging in one corner, but I guess that's okay. These lamps I found with Gary Hager, who was one of my favorites, who worked at Parish-Hadley, who died years ago. I adored him. I found this crazy otter at Apple Bartlett's shop on Dark Harbor on Islesboro, and she did this. This is another one of her decoupage pieces that came from a show she did at Triage, Bunny and John Roselli's shop in New York that closed a few years ago. But I just thought it was so wonderful. Somewhere in here there's a little metal bird. I don't see it now, but I'm not wearing my glasses. But there's a little cat hiding there, and a chicken, and a goat. It's just, oh, here's the bird. But I think she's just, she's painted the trees, but this is part of a wallpaper, and it's got three-dimensional qualities to it, which I just love. I just love her work. So this is my library. There's one wall of books, but it's my many years of collecting animal prints. Most of them are crooked at the moment, but it actually started here with this Jersey cow. I went to a boarding school in Massachusetts, and one night we were out late beyond when we should have been out, and I saw this on a barn, and it was propped up against the side and was in terrible disrepair, so I took it, which I shouldn't have done, but I did, and it's always been one of my favorite things. It was in my room at school, college. It's been with me since 1974. I just love it. But that sort of started this whole collecting. There was a couple up in Manchester, Vermont, who had a lot of these prints, and they probably are just from books, but you know, they're just, everything's been added to it since. You know, this needlework. This is one of Apple Bartlett's little decoupage. That's from a dealer in London. People have given me these things over the year. This is a little drawing by a cousin of mine. So I just collect them. Things that I love, anything to do with animals. This is a sculpture which I've been meaning to have a base made for by Bruno Romeda that I loved. I bought in the 1980s. I just love this work. I've always wanted to get it higher so you look through it going down the stairs. This cat Albert gave me, it was next to his bed. I've always loved it. And I just, you know, I collect things, anything. Little brass animals. That lamp has the tiger on it. It was something I gave to my ex-husband. You can see everything now. I running out of wall space, so I'm starting to hang things on the bookcases. I mean, there's this wonderful woman named Sarah Battle in England who makes these little decoupage pieces. So I think there's 1, 2, 3, I think there are 4 of them that I have. I just love her work. And, you know, I've had that creature forever, and then I found the owl lanterns, and then I found a second one at a yard sale, and this is another one of those cats like I have in the living room. But, you know, everything sort of finds a home. I just shove it in a shelf, and I have a thing for owls, so I've got 2 there and 1 there, and those 2 there, or 1 up there anyway. But I just, anything to do with animals I always love. I love this seal. He belonged to a client, and she gave him to me a few years ago when she sold her house, made by John, I'm blanking on his name, but I just think he's so sweet. But you know, I just mix everything up. I mean, inexpensive little wicker elephant, the table that, you know, was Gary Hager's at Parish-Hadley that I love, and my giraffe. I know, isn't he wonderful? He's been with me a long time too. I think I got him when my youngest was a little girl, and he was in their room, and you know, no one thought it was fun to take him off to college or to their first apartment, but I was happy to have him with me. I've always loved this, you know, usually you see these garden stools and they're made to look like elephants, but this one's a rhinoceros, so I've always loved him. This is a rug made. Albert Hadley always had a lot of the hooked zebra rugs. This is one of them from his collection. So as you can see, I mean, there's a cow hooked rug, and here's a whale, and it's just endless, you know, endless animals in this house. These mice, I don't remember what year it was, but Parish-Hadley did a table setting for American Ballet Theater, and we had one afternoon where we painted these mice. There were, I don't know how many of them, but they were on the tables, and they held up, somehow, and I don't remember how, they held up a bowl of nuts on every table. That was the centerpiece. And so we had little skirts made for them, and I don't know, they just have sentimental value to me. A funny butter dish my daughter gave me, and this is a chicken that was one of the first things Mrs. Parish's daughter Apple made it for a show house I did in Far Hills, New Jersey, with Malcolm Forbes, something to do with Malcolm Forbes. I don't even remember now, but many, many years ago. I keep things. I'm a pack rat. That cockatiel weather vane was from Mario Boada's collection again. It was at Sotheby's, and there was such interest in his sale that I think they called me at 11:30 to say it was up. And I got it for nothing because everyone had gone to sleep. But I just thought it was kind of wonderful. Those valances actually I had made for the Kips Bay show house room I did. And they're tin, and they were made by an auto body shop and then painted by Chuck Fisher, who's a wonderful decorative artist, to match the wallpaper, which is in my front hall. But it was that Sue Ellen wallpaper with the stars was the wallpaper used on the walls there. And I love these flowers by Libby Cameron, who owns that company, the Green Vase, that makes all the wonderful paper flowers. I've actually taken a couple of courses of hers. I love her things. This is my pack. Come here. Come on. Nugget. So Marta's been chewing on her foot, so she's wearing her cone of shame, poor dog. But this is Figgy, come here. Figgy. This is the matriarch. These are all her offspring. This is Liesel and Marta, who were named for the Von Trapp children from The Sound of Music, and I never changed their names. Nugget was from a litter last year where the puppies were all named after elves, Santa's elves. Bree, and her brother was Cheddar, who Todd Romano has. Henry was a solo puppy, and he's a little bit crazy, but he's very sweet. But he's the full brother of Marta and Liesel. I know, it's very exciting. And then we have the newest group. And they're named after herbs and spices. Come on, baby. Leave your puppies alone. So you can see they're 4 weeks old. They're very little. And this is day 2 in the kitchen. They've just moved from my bedroom, but you have Chicory, Chive, who's this? This is parsley, pepper, curry, and paprika is this little one over there. But they're very, they're just really coming into their own. They're walking and making lots of sweet noises, and will leave me in about a month, sadly. This is actually their half-brother, and that's their mother. My children always complain that the dogs are always underfoot, which they are. There are too many of them, but I love them dearly. And so this room was a little office that you entered off the living room when I first bought this house, and I really wanted a room for just the dogs. So this is the doggy room. It's filled with their beds. None of the crates have doors on them, but they sleep in them anyway, and they're ribbons from dog shows. I'm not showing them anymore. And it's where they like to hang out. And when they're underfoot, I put them all in here, and they're perfectly happy. And so it's, they have curtains, which were old curtains that I had, because at night I have to cover the window, because otherwise it's like watching TV for them, and they see deer and fox and coyote and start barking all night long. So I replaced the floor and I painted it. But I'm not one of those fancy kitchen people. And I just painted the walls pink because I had extra pink paint. You can see the puppies are all just really waking up to life. They're trying to bite each other, and they haven't figured out to bite each other's tails yet, but they figured out ears and necks. And I think he's just dying to play with them, but you can see he's like baby Huey. He's too big, and he would really hurt them. You can see they're starting to roughhouse. And I actually had this in my old house too. This is a stark carpet, and with 6 dogs, it's the only thing that doesn't show every spot because it's spotted, so it works. So you want to come upstairs, and I'll show you my room. So this is the second floor landing, and this is my grandmother and her 2 sisters, Anne, Isabel, and Mary. Mary was this one, who's my grandmother. I love this portrait. It's kind of perfect because I have 3 children. But these horse paintings are paintings of Roderick William Cameron, who was my great-great-great-grandfather, who lived on a farm called Clifton Burley, which was actually underneath the Verrazano Bridge. And he bred racehorses, and his horse, Aristides, was actually the first winner of the Kentucky Derby, of the first Kentucky Derby. But I love these paintings because they've got all of his initials on the buckets and the horse blankets. I just think they're kind of wonderful. Unfortunately, I don't know which horse is which, but my towel collection, which has got to be at least 30 years old, of all my different Porto towels, which I love. It's my big extravagance in life, that and dog food. And this is my bedroom, which is slightly askew at the moment because the puppies sleep in here with me for the first 3 weeks of their life. So they've just moved downstairs. I still keep them up here at night in their whelping box. But again, this room just has funny little things in it, things that I've collected. And Mrs. Parish gave me this, and Parish-Hadley gave me this bookcase, which I loved, looking like curtains. And this is, I played with as a little girl. It's from Queen Elizabeth's coronation in 1952, and all of the horses and the beefeaters. And I love anything to do with the royal family, so I have a collection of cups and that I've had that, started with her coronation, probably from my grandmother that she gave me, but anything to do with all these cups I love. And these are little watercolors done by Albert that he gave me for my birthday. This is a little sketch of the window at Bergdorf Goodman's, which I did with him, I don't remember what year, but I've always loved that little sketch and that little drawing of my mother. And then these are drawings by Mita Corsini Bland for a book that I worked on called Sister Parish Design. And a little mouse my mother gave me and these are lamps from Christopher Spitzmiller. And it's all just a mishmash. My daughter brought me back this quilt from India. This is a leftover fabric from when Parish-Hadley was thinking about doing something with quadrille, but this little sofa Albert gave me. This bed belonged to Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney, and for some reason no one in the family wanted it, so I got it. And these are little drawings by Albert, a room, someone's living room we did in New York, and 2 little drawings of a topiary and a flower arrangement. And I saw that lion up in Kent, Connecticut at Artifacts and loved it. This was Sailor's Valentine, came from my grandparents' house in Maine. And I must say I'm kind of disappointed to know, someone told me recently that these sailors' valentines were not always made by the sailors, but in fact they bought them in ports during the war. I like the idea that they made them for their sweethearts. Oh, my favorite thing in this room actually is this ruler, which lists all the kings of England down to Queen Elizabeth. There must be a fox outside. But isn't it wonderful? British history rulers. And you can measure on the other side. Isn't that the best? What does home mean to me? Everything. I'm a homebody. I'm not a social butterfly by any means. So for me, there's great solace to be found at home, and not with my things, but just surrounded by the comfort of pretty things. I think, I just don't think that, I can't imagine living in an ugly space. It's just never been what I've been about and what I would want to do. I need to wake up and feel inspired by something pretty in the room, be it a jar on a table or a painting on the wall or just a color that catches my eye.
Thanks for watching. For more Homeworthy content, be sure to like and subscribe.